Before we begin, close your eyes for a moment. Not to escape, to arrive. Feel the weight of your body where you're sitting. Notice the small discomforts you've been ignoring, that tension in your lower back, that tightness in your chest. Don't adjust anything yet. Just recognize that you're carrying something. We all are. That heaviness you feel, the places where you've been cracked and poorly mended, that's not a problem to solve. That's the raw material we're here to work with. Because 5 centuries ago in Japan, artisans discovered something that modern psychology is only now beginning to understand. The broken places, when treated with the right attention, don't just heal. They become the source of your greatest strength. In Kyoto, in the year 1568, there was a young potter named Hiroshi who served in the workshop of the great tea master Sen no Rikyu. Hiroshi had been apprenticed since he was 7 years old, spending his childhood grinding clay, mixing glazes, tending kilns. By the time he was 19, his hands knew porcelain the way a musician knows their instrument. He could feel imperfections in a bowl's wall thickness that were invisible to the eye. He could hear in the kiln's temperature whether a piece would survive the firing. He had natural talent, that rare gift that separates the craftsman from the master. But talent, as Hiroshi would learn, is not the same as mastery. One spring morning, Rikyu was preparing for a tea ceremony honoring the visiting daimyo from Osaka, a powerful lord whose favor could make or destroy reputations. For this ceremony, Rikyu needed a specific tea bowl, one that embodied wabi-sabi, that uniquely Japanese aesthetic of finding beauty in imperfection and impermanence. He gave Hiroshi the commission. 7 days to create something worthy of a lord's hands, 7 days to prove himself. Hiroshi worked without sleep. He threw 100 bowls, kept 3, destroyed the rest. He experimented with glazes that had subtle irregularities, surfaces that felt rough under the fingertips but pleased the eye with their honesty. On the 6th day, he created what he knew was his masterwork, a bowl the color of winter sky, with a glaze that broke into 1,000 tiny cracks during firing, creating a pattern like ice forming on a pond. It was perfect in its imperfection. It was everything Rikyu had asked for. He carried it carefully to Rikyu's quarters, walking slowly across the stone courtyard, aware that his entire future lived in his hands. And then a servant rushed past him, bumped his shoulder, not hard but unexpected. The bowl left Hiroshi's hands. It seemed to fall in slow motion, spinning in the air, catching sunlight, beautiful even as it descended toward the stones. It shattered into 7 pieces. Hiroshi stood frozen, staring at the fragments scattered at his feet. 6 years of apprenticeship, hundreds of hours of practice, his one chance to prove himself, all of it lay broken on the stones. The servant, who had bumped him, apologized frantically, bowing repeatedly, terrified of punishment. But Hiroshi barely heard him. He was looking at the pieces of his bowl and seeing something else. The end of his career, the death of his dream. Proof that he was not ready, would never be ready, should have been more careful, should have held tighter, should have been better. Have you felt that moment? That instant when something you've built with care and hope just breaks, and all you can see is the wreckage. Take a breath, share in the comments what broke for you, what moment shattered something you'd carefully constructed. I read every response, and your stories often teach me what I couldn't see on my own. Hiroshi gathered the pieces in silence. His hands were shaking. He placed them carefully in his sleeve and walked to Rikyu's quarters, preparing to confess his failure. He found the tea master in the garden, sitting in stillness before a stone basin. Hiroshi approached, knelt, and placed the broken pieces on the ground before him. "Master, I have failed you. The bowl is destroyed. I accept whatever consequences you deem appropriate." Rikyu looked at the pieces for a long moment. Then he did something Hiroshi didn't expect. He smiled. "Show me what you see when you look at these pieces." Hiroshi looked down. "I see failure, master. I see 6 years of training that wasn't enough. I see that I was not careful enough, not worthy of this commission." Rikyu picked up one of the larger fragments, turned it in the light. "You see endings. I see beginnings. You see what was lost. I see what can be created." He set the piece down gently. "Tell me, when this bowl was whole, how many others like it existed in the world?" Hiroshi thought. "Many, master. The glaze technique is traditional. The form is classical. Perhaps 1,000 similar bowls exist. And now, how many bowls like this one exist now?" "None, master." This specific bowl, broken in this specific way, has never existed before. Rikyu nodded. Before it broke, this bowl was skillful but not unique. Now it has the possibility of becoming something that never existed and can never exist again. The question is whether you have the courage to see that possibility. He stood and walked to his workshop, gesturing for Hiroshi to follow. Inside, he opened a cabinet and removed a jar containing dark lacquer and a smaller container of gold powder, fine as dust, gleaming even in the dim light. This is Hiroshi lacquer, mixed with pure gold. In China, when a valuable bowl breaks, they repair it with metal staples, making it functional again but marking it forever as damaged. We are going to do something different. We are going to make the break the most beautiful part. If this perspective is resonating with you, if you're beginning to see your own breaks differently, leave a like so others who need this teaching can find it. Over the next 5 days, Rikyu taught Hiroshi a technique that would later be called Kintsugi, golden joinery. But it was more than a repair method. It was a complete philosophy about imperfection, damage, and transformation. First, they cleaned each broken edge with absolute care, removing every particle of dust. Rikyu explained that this step was essential. If you apply gold to dirty edges, the repair fails later, usually when you need it most. In life, this means sitting with your damage without immediately trying to fix it. Most people skip this step. They grab the first explanation that makes them feel better and glue themselves back together before they understand what really broke. But understanding the break is how you prevent breaking the same way again. Second, they mixed the lacquer with gold powder, creating a paste that caught light like liquid sun. Rikyu showed Hiroshi how to apply it carefully to each crack, not trying to hide the seam but making it visible, intentional, beautiful. The gold wasn't covering the break, it was celebrating it. You must understand something, Rikyu said as they worked. This gold is precious, but its real value is not in the metal. Its value is in what it represents. When you repair something with gold, you are making a declaration. You are saying this object broke, and the breaking did not diminish it. The breaking transformed it into something more valuable than it was before. They worked in focused silence, the kind of silence that exists between master and student when real teaching is happening. Hiroshi's hands moved carefully, applying gold to each crack, watching the broken bowl slowly become whole again, but not in the way it had been whole before. The gold lines traced paths across the surface like rivers on a map, like veins carrying light through stone. On the 5th day, they finished. Rikyu held up the bowl, turning it slowly in the morning sun. The gold caught light, transforming the cracks into art. The bowl was no longer just a tea bowl. It was a story, a visible history of breaking and being rebuilt with intention and care. Hiroshi stared at it. The bowl he had thought was destroyed now held more beauty than the original. The cracks he had seen as failure now gave the piece its character, its uniqueness, its power. He had spent 6 years learning to create perfect vessels. In 5 days, he had learned that perfection was never the goal. Rikyu placed the bowl in Hiroshi's hands. This is what I wanted all along, not a perfect bowl, but a bowl that teaches. When the daimyo drinks tea from this vessel, he will see these golden lines and remember that everything breaks. Everything ends. And that breaking is not the end of beauty, it is beauty's transformation. The tea ceremony took place the following morning. Hiroshi stood at the edge of the room, watching as Rikyu performed the ritual, each movement precise and intentional. When he placed the Kintsugi bowl in front of the daimyo, there was a long silence. The lord picked it up, turned it slowly, running his fingers along the gold veins. This bowl has been broken. Rikyu bowed. Yes, my lord, and in breaking it became irreplaceable. The daimyo studied it for another long moment, then smiled. I have 100 tea bowls in my collection. None of them have taught me anything. This one teaches me that what breaks can be rebuilt, and the rebuilding can make it more valuable than it ever was whole. He looked at Rikyu. The young potter who made this, does he understand what he has created? Rikyu glanced at Hiroshi. He is beginning to understand. After the ceremony, after the daimyo had left, Rikyu called Hiroshi to his private quarters. The young potter expected praise or perhaps further instruction. Instead, Rikyu asked him a question. Tell me what you learned. Hiroshi thought carefully. He had learned the technique, certainly. He had learned how to mix lacquer, how to apply gold, how to piece broken ceramic back into a whole. But that wasn't what Rikyu was asking about. I learned that breaking is not failure, he said slowly. I learned that the cracks are where the teaching lives. I learned that something repaired with care and intention can be more valuable than something that never broke at all. Rikyu nodded. Good, now tell me what you haven't learned yet. Hiroshi was silent. You haven't learned that this principle applies to more than bowls. When a tea bowl breaks, we can see the damage clearly. We can count the pieces. But when a person breaks, the damage is invisible. The pieces scatter inside where no one else can see them. And so most people never repair themselves properly. They hide the breaking. They pretend they are still whole when they are actually fragments held together with shame and fear and desperate hope that no one will notice. He picked up the Kintsugi bowl. This bowl cannot hide its history. Everyone who touches it knows it broke. But because we have made the repair beautiful, the breaking becomes part of its value. Your task now is to learn how to do this with yourself, because you will break, Hiroshi. Life will shatter you. Love will crack you. Loss will split you into pieces so small you will think you can never be whole again. And in those moments, you will have a choice. You can hide the breaking and become fragile in exactly the places you cracked. Or you can repair yourself with gold, making your damage visible and beautiful and impossibly strong. What resonates most with you in this teaching? Where are you in your own Kintsugi process? Share your reflections in the comments. Your insights help everyone who reads them. Hiroshi spent the next 3 years in Rikyu's workshop, but his education had fundamentally changed. He was no longer learning to create perfect vessels. He was learning to recognize where things needed to break so they could become what they were meant to be. He learned that some bowls had flaws hidden in their structure, invisible cracks waiting to split the piece at the slightest stress. These bowls looked perfect, but were fundamentally weak. Better to let them break during firing than to sell them to a customer who would discover the weakness later at the worst possible moment. He learned that the most beautiful Kintsugi pieces were not those with the smallest cracks, but those with the most honest repairs. A bowl with one clean break, mended with gold, told a simple story. A bowl that had shattered into 20 pieces and been painstakingly reconstructed told a story of patient transformation, of refusing to let complexity become an excuse for abandonment. And he learned that the gold itself was a commitment. Cheap lacquer could hide breaks temporarily, making them nearly invisible, allowing you to pretend the damage never happened. But cheap repairs failed under heat, under use, under time. Gold was permanent. When you chose gold, you were choosing to make your history visible forever. That choice required courage most people didn't have. 3 years after the daimyo's ceremony, Hiroshi opened his own workshop. He continued making tea bowls, but his reputation grew not for flawless pieces, but for extraordinary Kintsugi work. People brought him their broken treasures, heirloom bowls that had been in families for generations, precious pieces that had survived wars and fires only to shatter in a moment of carelessness or accident. They came to him because they knew he understood that the breaking was not the end of the story. One afternoon, a woman arrived carrying a silk-wrapped bundle. She unwrapped it carefully to reveal the fragments of a tea bowl, but these pieces were different. They had been broken for years, perhaps decades. The edges were dirty, the fragments had been stored poorly, some pieces were missing entirely. "Can this be repaired?" she asked. Hiroshi examined each piece. "Technically, yes. But I need to know why you want it repaired. What is this bowl's history?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "My husband made this bowl for me when we were newly married. He was not a potter, but he wanted to make something with his own hands. It was clumsy, imperfect, too thick in some places and too thin in others. But it was his, made for me." She paused, gathering herself. "He died 7 years ago. The bowl broke 3 years later when I was moving houses. I have kept the pieces because I cannot throw them away, but I cannot look at them either. They remind me of everything that is broken and cannot be fixed." Hiroshi was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I can repair this bowl. But you must understand that the bowl you receive back will not be the bowl your husband made. It will be a different bowl, one that incorporates both his making and your loss. The gold will mark the place where it broke. You will never be able to forget that it shattered." She nodded. "I understand. I do not want to forget." I want to remember differently. Hiroshi spent 2 weeks on that bowl. The damaged edges required extensive preparation. Some cracks were so old that they had begun to chip, requiring careful grinding to create clean surfaces for the gold. The missing pieces meant he had to create new fragments from matching clay, firing them separately, then incorporating them into the repair with slightly different colored gold, so the reconstruction would be visible, honest about what was original and what was rebuilt. When he finished, he sent word to the woman. She came to his workshop and he placed the repaired bowl in her hands. She stared at it for a long time without speaking. The gold traced complex patterns across the surface, some lines from the original breaks, some marking where he had filled missing sections. The bowl was no longer her husband's simple creation. It was something else, a collaboration between her husband's making, the accident that broke it, her years of grief, and Hiroshi's patient reconstruction. Finally, she spoke. When my husband died, I broke too. Not in a way anyone could see. I looked whole, I functioned, but inside I was shattered. And I have been trying to put myself back together in a way that hides all the cracks, that makes me look like I was before. She touched the gold lines gently. But that is not possible, is it? I cannot go back to who I was. I can only become something different, something that incorporates the breaking. Hiroshi nodded. The bowl your husband made was beautiful because it was made with love. The bowl you hold now is beautiful because it has survived breaking. Both kinds of beauty are real, but only one kind teaches you that you can be shattered and still become whole again. She wrapped the bowl carefully, paid him far more than he asked, and left. 3 months later, she returned with her own broken tea bowl, one she had owned since childhood. She wanted to learn Kintsugi herself. Over the next year, Hiroshi taught her the technique, but what she really learned was not about pottery. She learned that repair requires patience, that you cannot rush the process of making broken things whole. She learned that cleaning the edges, sitting with the damage before trying to fix it, was the most important and most difficult step. She learned that choosing gold meant choosing to make your history visible, trusting that other people could handle seeing that you had been broken. And she learned that the first piece you repair is never really about the bowl. It is about discovering whether you believe broken things can become valuable again. If you're finding value in this teaching, if it's helping you see your own life differently, consider subscribing. These explorations reach further when we walk this path together. By the time Hiroshi was 40, his workshop had become a place of pilgrimage. People traveled from distant provinces, not just to have broken pottery repaired, but to learn the philosophy behind the technique. They came because they understood that Kintsugi was not really about bowls at all. It was about discovering how to live with damage, how to transform breaking into becoming, how to choose gold when everything in your culture tells you to choose invisibility. One spring, a young samurai arrived at the workshop. He was recently returned from his first battle, a skirmish that had gone badly. His lord's forces had been routed, and the young samurai had frozen in combat, had failed to protect his brother in arms, had watched a close friend die because he could not move when movement was required. He carried no broken pottery. He carried only shame. I heard you teach people how to repair broken things, he said to Hiroshi. Can you teach me how to repair myself? Hiroshi studied him. You froze in battle. The samurai's jaw tightened. Yes, and now you believe you are broken, that you are a coward, that you will always freeze when danger comes. Yes. Hiroshi picked up a tea bowl from his shelf, one of his own pieces, and deliberately dropped it on the floor. It shattered into pieces. The samurai flinched at the sound. This bowl is broken, Hiroshi said. Is it now worthless? The samurai looked at the fragments. I do not know, neither do I. But I know it has potential to become something it could not have become if it had stayed whole. He gestured to the pieces. Gather them, count them, examine each edge. The samurai knelt and carefully picked up each fragment. There were 11 pieces, from large sections of the bowl's wall to tiny chips of the rim. He arranged them on the workbench, fitting them together like a puzzle. Now tell me, Hiroshi said, which piece is the broken piece? The samurai frowned. All of them are broken pieces. Each one has cracked edges. Exactly. When a bowl breaks, it does not create a broken piece and whole pieces. Every fragment is now defined by the break. But here is what you are missing. Every piece also still retains its essential nature. This piece is still porcelain. It still has the glaze your hands applied. It still has the strength of the clay and the transformation of the fire. The break changed its shape, but it did not change its fundamental nature. The samurai was quiet, beginning to understand. You froze in battle, Hiroshi continued. That is true, that happened. But that freeze did not change your fundamental nature. You are still a warrior, you still have training, you still have courage, even if in one moment your nervous system could not access it. The break revealed where you need to strengthen yourself, but it did not destroy who you are. He picked up the lacquer and gold. Now, if you are willing, you will repair this bowl. And as you do, you will learn what it means to sit with your own damage without running from it. You will learn that repair requires patience and cannot be rushed. You will learn that the gold you choose, the way you make sense of your breaking, determines whether you become fragile or impossibly strong. The samurai spent 3 weeks in Hiroshi's workshop, learning Kintsugi. Each day, he cleaned edges, mixed lacquer, applied gold with shaking hands that slowly grew steady. And each evening, he and Hiroshi would sit in the garden, and the samurai would talk about the battle, about the fear, about the moment his body refused to move, about the friend whose death he carried like a stone. Hiroshi listened without judgment. And slowly, the samurai began to understand that his freeze response was not evidence of cowardice. It was evidence that his nervous system had been overwhelmed by stimulus it had not been trained to handle. The shame was real, but it was not the whole truth. The whole truth was more complex, more human, more repairable. On the final day, the samurai held up the completed bowl. Gold traced paths across the white surface, marking each break, making the damage visible and beautiful. I understand now, he said quietly. The freezing was information, not identity. It taught me that I need different training that prepares my nervous system for combat stress, not just my sword technique. Hiroshi nodded. And when you return to battle, when your body wants to freeze again, what will you do? I will remember this bowl. I will remember that breaking once does not mean I am permanently broken. I will remember that gold makes cracks stronger than the original material, but only if you apply it with intention. The samurai returned to his lord's service. 6 months later, word reached Hiroshi that the young warrior had distinguished himself in battle, had moved toward danger instead of freezing, had saved 2 men from his unit. When asked how he had overcome his fear, the samurai reportedly showed his commander a small tea bowl he carried in his pack, gold lines tracing its surface. I carry this to remember that I am strongest in the places I once broke, he said. What does that mean for you right now, in your life? What practice or reminder could help you honor your own Kintsugi process? Let me know in the comments. Your answer might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Hiroshi continued his work for another 30 years. He trained students in Kintsugi technique, but more importantly, he trained them in Kintsugi philosophy. He taught them that every person you meet is a Kintsugi piece in progress, broken in places, being repaired with whatever gold they have available, trying to make sense of their damage in a world that tells them to hide it. He taught them that some people choose cheap lacquer instead of gold, quick fixes that make the break invisible but leave them fragile. These people look whole but crack easily because they never properly repaired the original damage. He taught them that some people collect their broken pieces but never begin the repair, keeping their damage in boxes, too afraid to look at it directly, too overwhelmed to know where to start. These people are not broken beyond repair. They are simply waiting for permission to believe that repair is possible. And he taught them that some people, the rarest ones, choose gold deliberately. They sit with their damage, clean every edge, apply precious metal with care and intention, and make their breaking visible. These people become unbreakable, not because they never crack again, but because they have learned that cracking is part of the process, and they know exactly how to repair themselves when it happens. In his final years, Hiroshi created one last piece. He took a simple tea bowl, one he had made decades earlier, and deliberately broke it. Then he repaired it with gold slowly, meditatively, applying everything he had learned over a lifetime. When he finished, he placed it on his shelf with a note that read, "This bowl was perfect before I broke it. Now it is complete." His students asked him to explain the difference between perfect and complete. Hiroshi picked up the bowl, letting light catch the gold veins. "Perfect means without flaw," he said. But perfection is a fantasy. Everything that exists is subject to breaking, to damage, to time. To chase perfection is to chase something that cannot exist in this world. He turned the bowl slowly. Complete means whole in a way that incorporates breaking. Complete means nothing is missing, not because damage was avoided, but because damage was integrated. This bowl is complete because it contains both its making and its breaking, both the original form and the repair. It is honest about its entire history. One of his youngest students, a girl of 14, asked, "But master, if nothing can be perfect, and everything will eventually break, what is the point of making beautiful things at all?" Hiroshi smiled. "That is the question that will guide your entire practice. And the answer is this: you make beautiful things because beauty is not about permanence. Beauty is about attention, about care, about intention. When you make something with care, even knowing it will break, you are practicing reverence for the present moment. And when that thing inevitably breaks, you have an opportunity to practice reverence again, reverence for transformation, for damage, for the possibility of becoming something new." He placed the bowl in the girl's hands. "You will break many times in your life. The question is not whether you will break. The question is whether you will learn to repair yourself with gold, or whether you will spend your whole life pretending you are not full of cracks." Hiroshi died at 73, peacefully in his workshop, his hands still stained with lacquer and gold dust. His students continued his work, spreading Kintsugi technique throughout Japan and eventually throughout the world. But more importantly, they spread the understanding that breaking is not the end of value, that repair is not about hiding damage, that the gold you choose when you rebuild yourself determines whether you become brittle or unbreakable. Centuries later, his philosophy endures. In therapy offices in California, counselors talk about Kintsugi as a metaphor for trauma recovery. In corporate boardrooms in New York, leaders discuss how their failures, repaired with proper reflection, made them more capable than success ever did. In kitchens and living rooms around the world, people repair broken ceramics with gold, understanding that they are not really repairing pottery, they are practicing a way of seeing damage that transforms shame into strength. The teaching is simple but profound. You will break. That is not a possibility, it is a certainty. Life will crack you open in places you did not know existed, and when that happens, you have a choice. You can hide the breaks, using whatever quick fix makes them invisible, and live in constant fear that someone will discover you are not as whole as you appear. Or you can gather your pieces with care, sit with the damage without rushing to fix it, choose the finest gold you can find, and repair yourself in a way that makes your history visible and beautiful and impossibly strong. The cracks are not the end of your value, they are the beginning of your transformation. The gold is not covering your damage, it is celebrating what you survived. And when you are finally complete, when you have integrated every break into a new wholeness, people will look at you and see something they cannot name but desperately need. They will see proof that breaking does not destroy you. They will see evidence that careful repair makes you more valuable than you ever were intact. They will see that your golden veins, your visible history of damage and reconstruction, are the most beautiful thing about you. That is the teaching of Kintsugi, not that you can avoid breaking, but that you can choose how you rebuild. Not that damage does not matter, but that damage, properly honored, becomes the source of your greatest strength. Now it is your turn. Look at your own cracks, the places you have been broken, the damage you have been hiding or ignoring or trying to staple together with whatever you had available. Those places are not your weakness. They are where your gold goes. They are the beginning of your transformation into something unique, irreplaceable, impossibly valuable. Choose your gold carefully, apply it with intention, make your repair visible, and become complete.